This is Making Stitches, and this time we'll hear from Becky Davies-Downes, who after nearly 2 decades working in TV and film costume departments, found herself immersed in the world of 1940s wartime fashions and the stories of the women who wore them. She believes we can learn a lesson from history.
If we think about where we are in fashion now, everybody's kind of concerned about how much we consume, about fast fashion, how things are produced, about the workforce, slavery, child slavery, all those sorts of things. And if you kind of look back, and you look back to this period in time, there's an awful lot of stuff that was being done that can give us a very good idea on where the fashion industry needs to head now. There's a lot of really good lessons to be learned. So, people now are becoming more conscious of mending things and learning to sew a button back on if it falls off. And that's exactly what the Make Do and Mend scheme was doing. It was teaching people to get the most out of their clothes and to go, not just clothes, but like textiles in general, and prolonging their lives so that they were in use for as long as absolutely possible.
Hello and welcome to Making Stitches. I'm Lindsay, I'm a lifelong crafter and I love hearing people's stories. Making Stitches podcast gives me the perfect excuse to speak to fascinating creative people about why they do what they do. This time I'm sharing a chat I had recently with Becky Davies-Downes. Now, if you listened to my Yarndale episode a couple of episodes back, you may well recognise Becky's voice.
All of my work is based around 1940s wartime Britain. So I make and research and tell stories of the women that were alive during the war, what they were doing, what they were wearing, and the kind of the ingenious, resourceful things that they were coming up with to make their clothes look more exciting.
Indeed, which obviously was pretty hard in those days.
Yeah, so once rationing started to bite and people's clothing, they had less and less clothes, wardrobes contracted, there was less fabric around, so even making your own clothes became difficult. There were things like the utility scheme was brought in, which controlled how much cloth was used for garments, and also things like how many buttons. You could only have a certain number of pleats. You could have, I think it was 2 knife pleats and 1 box pleat in a skirt. So everything was controlled down to the last button, and that made it really, really difficult to show your individuality and show your character through your clothing, which is something that we're all used to doing.
We take it for granted, don't we?
We do take it for granted, and it's kind of what, for me, makes it such an interesting period in the history of fashion. It's one of the few times where what people wore wasn't governed by personal choice and what people wanted to wear. There was all sorts of other things that came into play. There was social issues, economic issues, political issues. Everything was controlled.
When I bumped into Becky at this year's Yarndale Festival back in September, I found that what we spoke about really resonated with me. Here was someone who, like me, loves people's stories. She actively researches the stories behind the designs she creates. And not only that, she told me a little bit about her career working in TV and film costume departments. Well, I couldn't just leave it there. I caught up with Becky again last week to chat in more depth about not only her work now, but also how it all started.
So I left school at 16, didn't go on and do A-levels. I went on to art college and then spent 5 years training in fashion design. Got to the end of that and wasn't quite what I wanted to do. I didn't quite fit into that kind of fashion mould, really. And I was living in Leeds at the time, and I just put in an application to Yorkshire Television. They were looking for people in the costume department. So I sent in the CV. Obviously, I didn't have any experience. I hadn't done anything really particularly that kind of led me there. Had an interview, and they took me on. Mainly, I think, because of my background in fashion, I could make. So a lot of people that come into costume, or certainly in the days when I was working in costume, a lot of people that came into the department didn't have those skills. They couldn't sew, they couldn't make, they could do quick running repairs and things on set, which is a lot of the time all you need, but they couldn't actually make. That was a whole different job that somebody else did. So yeah, I think that's what got me in. And then I worked at Yorkshire Television for a while as a freelancer, but then met other people and ended up doing just short of 20 years, working for the BBC, Yorkshire, loads of independent companies, doing all sorts of different things. So I did drama, did live TV, which was always good fun, a lot of children's television, which was brilliant. Just lots of different stuff across a range of output.
How exciting.
Just had a very good time.
I can well imagine. So what were the programmes, or can you give me some of the programmes that you actually worked on?
Yeah, you have to bear in mind that I left 15, 16 years ago. So a lot of the programmes I worked on, people are like, what? But some of the big ones, so I did Life on Mars, the 70s police show. I did both series of that. I did a brilliant kids programme. I did about 7 seasons of it. My Parents Are Aliens.
Oh, yes, I remember that one. Yes.
Oh, that was brilliant. We did some cracking stuff on that. But, At Home with the Braithwaites, did that for a long time. The inevitable soaps. Obviously, I started at Yorkshire, so I did Emmerdale. Did Corrie for a bit. But, yeah, good times.
How fascinating. And what's it like hopping from kind of, programme to programme? Because presumably different programmes need different things. When you've got Life on Mars, you very much need clothes of a particular era. And I guess My Parents Are Aliens is a completely different kettle of fish to that.
It certainly was. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you just get used to it. Sometimes when I hear friends talk about being kind of like employed, being an employee, that is not something that I have any kind of understanding of. I've never been staff. I've always been freelance. So hopping around and going from one show to another. And also that thing of not knowing, you start on a programme, you know how long it's going to be. You know whether it's a 2-month job or a 6-month job or whatever it is. But you don't know what you're doing next. And whereas people say to me they find that really difficult to get the head round, and how did you survive? And it's like, I can't get my head round being staff and knowing what you're doing for the next however many years. But I think it suits some people and it doesn't suit others. But it's all I know. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the variety. I liked going from quite a serious drama to a bonkers kids show. It's just nice because I think it keeps you fresh as well. It's like you never quite know what's coming at you. So it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you doing different things. And for me, that's how I learn and how I grow in what I'm doing, is by doing lots of different things. So for me, it worked really well. But yeah, some people don't take to that sort of life. And there's also the thing of that you kind of don't know where you're going to be. So you could be based anywhere. So, I mean, my home is in Ilkley in West Yorkshire. And obviously I live here with my husband and my daughter. My husband's a set designer, so he is still off in film and TV. He can be working in Glasgow, he could be working in Manchester, he could be in London, he could be in Prague, he could be the Maldives, he could be anywhere. And that's kind of like the other thing that some people don't take to, that kind of, it's like a transient lifestyle really, isn't it? You are where you end up and you just get on with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, that's quite a juggle, trying to get your head around, I guess, the unpredictability of things. But presumably you get to choose what kind of programmes and what jobs you want to take as well. So you'll have an element of control maybe.
You do have an element of control. Yes, of course you can turn a programme down, but there is always that thing of there are only so many programs going on at any one time. Some people like to work all year. Some people like to do one job a year. So in that kind of sense, you've got control. Got control about how much of the year you work. But yeah, you can't turn too many down because you don't know when the next one's coming. So there's always that fear of, will there be something else? If I turn this down, will something better come along? But you get used to it.
Yeah.
You get used to things like that. So, and then you get not used to it when you're not doing it anymore.
Yeah, I'm sure. Now, as far as your sewing skills are concerned and your creativity and that kind of thing, how did it work within that line of business? Were you having to make costumes from scratch, or were you having to source, fashion from a particular time, like for Life on Mars, or were you adapting things or making them from scratch?
It very much depends on the programme, the designer and the budget. So obviously if you've got lots of money to spend, you can just go off and have everything made. And that's great. Most programmes don't have that sort of budget. You're sourcing stuff. So a lot of it's hired. A lot of stuff would be hired. So like with Life on Mars, we hired a lot of stuff from Bristol Costume Services. So we'd be down there. I think we spent a couple of weeks down there kind of going through all the rails. And that's the really fun bit. You're just going through the rails, looking for stuff and going, yeah, that could work or that couldn't work, or, these look great together. So there's a lot of sourcing from costume hire houses. There'd be some buying. We did buy quite a bit for Life on Mars. At the time, there was quite a trend of 70s stuff, so you could find it, and you control the vintage shops and the charity shops, and you can pick stuff up. Other stuff was modern, but didn't look modern. And yeah, a little bit of making along the way, of making things work.
Yeah.
So it's a mixture. It very much depends on what you're doing. I mean, I did work on some period stuff. I did a period piece, Lost in Austin, and we had a lot made for that. But that was quite a weird. That was a weird piece because it was obviously a Jane Austen piece, but it had a modern element. That there was a modern side to it. She was flipping between modern and period. So yeah, we had a lot made for that. So it just depends. It depends on the budget and what you're doing.
And presumably you came into contact with the stars of the shows that you were working on as well. How was that?
Yeah, you do. Obviously you do. So normally costume will be one of the first people they see in the morning, and one of the last people they see before they go home. So yeah, you can be with them a long time in close quarters. I mean, yeah, a lot of the time you're sat back at base with them, and yeah, you've got to keep them happy, keep them entertained, get them dressed, get them on set.
so that the producers and the directors can get the best out of them then, presumably.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so what was the decision then that took you away from this lifestyle of working in TV and film?
I got married in fact, we were filming Lost in Austin, and I got married in the middle of the shoot, had one day off to get married, went straight back to work. I got pregnant quite quickly. My husband works in the same industry. We were both used to floating around, being here, there and everywhere. Plenty of people in the industry have kids and carry on, but for us, it wasn't what we wanted to do. We wanted one of us at home, and obviously it was easier for me to be at home. So I stopped when I had my daughter. So that was 16 years ago. And then I've just never gone back. I think maybe at the time I thought I might have gone back, but other things have come along and I haven't.
Mm. But you've found another way to use your skills, haven't you? So I guess
Yeah,
that's the important thing.
it
If you can still do what makes you happy, it doesn't
was
necessarily have
really,
to be the same thing.
when I stopped, I was a bit kind of, I'd just been on a shoot that I hadn't enjoyed. And I was a little bit disillusioned. And then I stopped and I was a bit, oh, thank goodness, I don't want to do that anymore. And it took me a while to work out what I was going to do. I did all sorts of strange things to start with. I went off and I went back to college and did a nutritional therapy degree, which seemed a bit bonkers because it was quite a long way away from where I'd come from. Did that and then went, oh no, actually, that's not the right thing. It took me a long time to realise that actually it's all I know. It's all I've ever done. I learned to sew at a really, really young age. It's all I've ever done, it's all I ever know, and it's probably all I ever will do. So it took me a while to come back round to, I need to do something that involves sewing. And then even when I'd worked that out, it was like, oh, what am I going to do now then? And I was a little girl at the time, and I was like, oh, I could make dolls, or I could, do children's girls' clothes, and none of that was quite right. So it did take me a bit of time to find my place. But then once I did, I knew it was right because it just took off and I was happy and I was working, just started working away at the business and it just started to move in the right direction. So I thought, yeah, this is it. This is the right thing. Yeah, it definitely took me a while and I definitely went through some strange phases.
As somebody who's also given up a career, when children came along and then trying to find your way back in and what you're meant to do now, I can completely appreciate where you're coming from. It is hard trying to almost reinvent yourself, but using the skills that your existing skills and the things that drive you. So yeah, I can totally get where you're coming from. What was the spark though that set you off on your William and Tilda journey?
I don't really know. I don't know how I ended up there. I think I've always liked history. I've always been interested in history, but always particularly the Second World War. There were loads of things about it. So it was kind of a period I was interested in anyway. It's really interesting from a history of fashion point of view, but there's just so many elements of it that I think I could be stuck in those 5 years for the rest of my life, just researching those 5 years, and I wouldn't get to the end of the interesting stuff that there is out there to find out. And I don't know, I can't even remember how we got started. I think I was looking at some photos, old family photos, and looking at my gran and what she was wearing in her uniform during the war, and it was a little bit of, oh, this is interesting, and off I went down a hole, and then I've popped up now and I've got a business.
Fantastic. And so
it was never a kind of like, what am I trying to say? It was never a kind of like, this is what I'm going to do, this is an avenue I'm going to go down. It just evolved and I ran with it, which is usually how the best ideas come about, isn't it?
Absolutely. Just go with the flow and see where it takes you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So would you mind reminding me, for anybody who didn't hear our chat on Yarndale, exactly what it is that you do?
That's a good question. Sometimes I'm not sure myself. So my work all focuses around 1940s wartime Britain. I look at the textiles, the sewing history, the fashion, but also importantly, the lives of the women that were living and working at that time. So I'm very interested in the various schemes that the government had going on. We're looking at rationing, at the utility scheme, make to amend scheme, things like that, and then introducing that into my sewing. But also, so I make reproduction items from the era, but alongside of that, I run sewing classes, mostly to do with making. I do teach people how to use vintage patterns because sewing patterns for the time are quite different, or the look quite different to a modern sewing pattern. Sometimes people are like, oh, how do you read this when there's nothing on it to read? So I do a bit of that, but I do mainly mending classes, but linking back to the Make, Do, Amend scheme. So I'll teach a lot of stitches that maybe people don't use anymore, that have been kind of now overlooked because we've got modern, better ways of doing things, or quicker ways of doing things, not better. So that's where I am. Anything textiles related to the war.
Fantastic. And where do you source your material from?
I don't use vintage material. I have relationships with various mills very close to where I live, and I use their, I don't like the word scrap because it makes it sound not very appealing, but their offcuts, their dead stock, their end of rolls, whatever you want to call it, the leftover bits that mills can't use, they can't sell on because it may be too small. So I will go along and buy up those bits, and then that's what I use. So a big part of my work is about using up as much stuff as possible, so as little waste is produced from my work. So I'll start with a reasonable sized piece of material. I can pretty much use all of it. My product range is structured so that I'll start with the big bits that go into my bags, and then I'll end up with the tiniest pieces will be made into flower petals. And I have a fabulous pattern from 1942 for a ladies Make, Do, Amend flower brooch. So that's how I use up my smallest scraps. So yeah, my fabric is all locally sourced from mills around where I live.
Not only are you following the ethos of the time that the work that you're doing, but also of present day. It's so important that we don't waste things and that every last scrap is used.
Yeah, and this is kind of what's so interesting about this period is actually, if we think about where we are in fashion now, everybody's kind of concerned about how much we consume, about fast fashion, how things are produced, about the workforce, slavery, child slavery, all those sorts of things. And if you kind of look back to this period in time, there's an awful lot of stuff that was being done that can give us a very good idea on where the fashion industry needs to head now. There's a lot of really good lessons to be learned. So like, people now are becoming more conscious of mending things and learning to sew a button back on if it falls off. And that's exactly what the Make, Do, Amend scheme was doing. It was teaching people to get the most out of their clothes, and to go, not just clothes, but like textiles in general, and prolonging their life so that they were in use for as long as absolutely possible.
Yeah, it's incredible. We've come full circle, really, or we need to come full circle, should I say?
Yeah, we do. And I mean, I think we talked at Yarndale. We mentioned rationing, and we talked about the utility scheme. And I said then that nobody is suggesting that is what we need to go back to. That we need to go back to rationing and the kind of the control that was in place there over how much people, consumerism. But there are some good lessons.
Mm.
And manufacturers could take some really good lessons, and just to reduce how much we are using. Mm. And if we just looked at it a little bit more closely, there might be an answer in there.
Absolutely.
Or not an answer, but there might be something in there that we could use.
Yeah, got it in one. I mean, you do see there are some fashion brands now that are going out of their way to source locally, to use ethical products and ethical methods in doing what they're doing. But the payoff quite often is the cost of the finished item. I guess it's finding a way to make it that it's accessible to the whole of the population to be able to buy products, rather than this quick fast fashion that's a lot cheaper but very costly for the environment and the people who have to make it.
Yeah, but that's why the utility scheme was actually so successful. So it was controlling the quality and the quantity. of clothing that was being produced. So it was set up, so it was there to make sure that people weren't being given, for want of a better explanation, rubbish clothing that wouldn't last. So and it was a good price. That was the point of it. It was a price that was affordable at a time when people had nothing. So it can be done. We have done it before. There's a blueprint there. We have done it before, and it was extremely successful. And yeah, I get what you're saying, that a lot now, the sustainable clothing does tend to be more expensive, but it doesn't need to be, or it doesn't have to be. We just need to think about it a little bit more and think about how we go about it.
Yeah. That's for a bigger brain than mine to work out, I have to say.
Bigger brain than mine as well. I have enough trouble with the coupon system, with the rationing scheme. That's complicated enough.
Gosh,
I don't
yes,
have
it must have been.
the answers.
No, not at all. So your line that you do at the moment, you've got your bags and you've got your beautiful brooches and little purses and things like that. Are you likely to add to your line of products that you produce? Is that something that you're going to develop over time, or?
I will do, yeah. I've got lots of stuff in research stage at the moment. This year I've been looking at Christmas during the war, and have been compiling a timeline of how presents and things like decorations and things, how that changed across the years. So that's a really interesting project. But everything takes time, doesn't it? When you're researching something first, it all takes time. But patterns come my way. People send me old patterns, or I find old patterns. So there will always be stuff being added. It is something, yeah, it will increase as time goes by. But for me, I won't make anything unless I know the history behind it. I won't make something for the sake of it. I've got to have a story behind it. I need to know its history, and I need to be able to link that back to the women alive at the time. So I think women were doing extraordinary things during the war that they'd never done before. And it's a nice way to tell those stories, to tell the stories of what they were doing, to link it to something like a brooch or a bag. It gives people something more to hang on to. That, do you know what I mean? If they've got something in front of them that they can look at and go, and you say to them, this is the story behind it, it somehow seems to resonate more. So yeah, everything that I make, there's got to be a link there somewhere.
Absolutely. So it must be absolutely fascinating finding the stories behind the items that you're making, though. I can imagine it's like going on a treasure hunt to try and find, a little gem of a story.
Do you know what? It's the best bit. I almost like that more than the sewing bit. And yeah, the thing that's caught my attention at the moment, and it has absolutely nothing to do with sewing, but it's a great story. I'm looking at munitions factories and how they were disguised as duck ponds.
Really?
So that the German bombers flying overhead would think it was a duck pond and wouldn't bomb them. And there's so many stories like that it's just brilliant. It's just the ingenuity just across the board during the war. It's like something I've never seen before. There are some incredible stories of the most amazing things people were doing. It's like, how did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, wow. I guess sometimes when you're up against it, you can do amazing things though, can't you? So
yeah, definitely, yeah. And that's the other thing that it's important to remember, is that it's lovely for me to sit here and say, oh, there's these great stories and I love researching and things, but you have to remember the background and what was going on, and that it was an awful period in history. There are still a lot of people alive that remember it or are feeling the effects of it, and you have to be respectful of that.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's so nice that you're able to keep it alive, and the memory of the women in particular through the work that you're doing, because quite often, certainly in the past, it's the males stories that are, you know, the story of the men in history that are remembered, as opposed to the women. And this is just such an important body of work, really, that you're doing by keeping it alive, and not only that, bringing it to new generations.
Yeah, I think that you're right. It was such it was such a different time for them. Women started working, and daft things like women started wearing trousers and all of those things that happened to women during the war. And then they were expected at the end to just go back to how they were before the war. It's quite a strange situation that they found themselves in. And so it is good to talk about it, and it's great to, I think it's good for kids as well. I mean, look, some of the work that I do is in schools, and it will just be a little sewing project, but you can talk to them at the same time, and it brings history to life for them. If you've got something that they can be doing and it relates to something in history, it just brings it alive, and they're more interested and they engage with it, and it makes them excited. So not only have you taught them a life skill, like how to sew a button on, but you've taught them a bit of history as well. You've taught them about do a men's scheme, and got them to think about it and to ask questions about it, and then they just seem to remember it more.
Yeah, no, that's so valuable. I remember myself being taught at school to do log cabin patchwork as part of a project that we were doing. And that's the thing. To be honest, I don't remember a great deal about the chap who had the log cabin patchwork quilt on his bed that we were learning about, but certainly that patchwork skills stayed with me. But yeah, it is so... I remember it like it was yesterday, sitting down with the teacher and sifting through all the pieces of material. It's so... Yeah, it's such a good tool for teaching kids.
Yeah, I remember we had to do a reproduction of the Bayer tapestry when I was at school.
That was ambitious.
Certainly was for a primary school. But it's always good to aim big.
Absolutely, aim high.
Yeah, I very vividly remember sewing it to my skirt, though. Hopefully my skills have improved now.
I should think they probably have. Oh, Becky, well, thank you so much for your time this morning. It's been really interesting talking to you about your career and what you're doing with your work at the moment. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been good to chat.
My thanks again to Becky for speaking to me not once but twice in quick succession for Making Stitches podcast. It was fascinating to chat with her, and I do hope you enjoyed listening. Before I go, I just want to remind you about my latest crochet pattern, which I've designed to raise funds for FareShare Greater Manchester. FareShare redistributes thousands of tonnes of food which otherwise would go to waste in the food industry to around 300 charities and community groups across Greater Manchester and the surrounding area. I started working for FareShare this year and have seen at first hand the impact this work has on people who really need it. And in the spirit of what Becky was talking about, it's wrong to waste valuable resources when so many people are going hungry. So I've designed a special charity Christmas crochet pattern to raise funds for FareShare Greater Manchester. It's for a wreath inspired by a Christmas dinner, complete with sprouts and pigs in blankets. All of the profits from the sale of the FareShare Festive Feast Wreath pattern will be going directly to FareShare Greater Manchester. It's had a lovely reaction so far, and I've even seen the first one made out in the wild, which was a huge thrill. The pattern is for sale in my Etsy shop called Making Stitches Shop, and you can find a link to the pattern in the show notes for this episode, along with all of Becky's links too. Thank you very much for listening. This is in fact the 80th episode of Making Stitches podcast and the last one of the current series. I'm off now to record some more creative chats and hope to be able to share them with you again before too long. To make sure you don't miss out on the new series, please make sure you're following Making Stitches on your favourite podcast app and on social media too. You'll get to find out straight away when a new episode's out. Until next time, thank you once again for listening and for supporting Making Stitches podcast. Take care of yourself and enjoy your crafting.